Welcome to my channel. I'm Laura, your cake artist. This episode is the first of a three-part mini-series for Halloween. This is an anatomical skull, or close to it. Took about 16 hours to create. I started with a 3-layer 8-inch vanilla scratch cake with vanilla buttercream. I mentioned in other videos that this buttercream recipe is pretty thick, and for a novelty cake or a sculpted cake, the thicker the better. It seems to hold together better. Specifically, with this design, I was aiming for anatomical accuracy. During the sculpting stage, I get pretty nervous. I'm always afraid I'm going to trim too much. In some future episodes, I will show you how to manage those mistakes. And it's as simple as taking cake scraps and mixing them with frosting, almost like making a cake pop, and then putting that mixture into spots that you didn't mean to cut off, cooling it so that it's nice and firm again, and then re-trimming. But we all as artists feel sometimes like we're faking it, or that we're really not as good as we think we are. And so that's kind of all in your head, and you have to get over that part of it and just go with your gut. But again, everything is fixable, especially with cake. Other valuable tools that I use would be offset spatulas or angled spatulas, and sometimes a flexible cake scraper or fondant smoother. Honestly, whatever tools work best for you, that's what you should use. Some things are a learning process with these tools, and that's okay as well. For this next step, I'm going to pause trimming and start stabilizing my cake. I like to use these bubble straws. They do a great job. They're flexible, easy to cut, and you can get them just about anywhere. I get mine on Amazon. I'll put a link below to where you can find these. But it's always important to stabilize your cake. Once I'm satisfied with the overall shape of my cake, I'm going to cover it in another layer of buttercream. And you'll see here that it's pretty well covered. Then we're going to move on to the modeling chocolate aspect. Here is my homemade modeling chocolate that I made. It's going to be thin, but not too thin. I'm going to be putting a lot of pressure on this cake, so I don't want it to rip or collapse on me. And I'm paneling this cake, so I'm not covering it with one giant piece. I'm going to do a front and a back section. Creating 2 separate pieces on this particular cake made me feel like I had a little bit more control over how the modeling chocolate actually sat on the cake. You can do one large piece, but I feel like sometimes that's a very heavy piece of modeling chocolate, and it might tug on parts of your cake that you don't want to change the shape of. I mean, you just spent all this time sculpting it. This is not the time to start screwing it up, but I'm just going to be working on these design aspects before I start putting in a lot of really small, minute details. I'm also using these super cool rubberized sculpting tools that were recommended by Natalie Sidesurf. She's a hyperrealistic cake artist. She's an everything artist, but she makes the best hyperrealistic cakes. And my X-Acto knife here. They are food safe. You just got to keep them clean and replace the blades often. And I'm just going to keep adding detail a little at a time. At this point, I just want to make sure all my edges are looking anatomically correct, and then I'll go through with my other tools and add texture. One of the most valuable lessons I've learned with tools is finding tools that are one piece. I do like the Wilton tools, don't get me wrong. They have a lot of good textures to them, but they're 2 pieces, and your ends will come off if you're really digging into a cake, or they're older tools. They constantly pop off, and it's just a bit annoying. So I like these 1-piece tools that I don't have to worry about. And of course, they need to be protected from the dishwasher and all that kind of stuff, and if you want them to last a while. Next, I'm going to add modeling chocolate to the skull to kind of add some dimension to the bridge of the nose. I'm really just trying to avoid putting any more pressure on the skull in areas that I know the modeling chocolate's a little thinner. And this goes back to my point about why I like modeling chocolate over fondant. I feel like, for me, I have more creative freedom with the modeling chocolate. As where you can't really dig into fondant like you can modeling chocolate, and it dries out super fast or it's cracking. So here it just kind of melts into itself. I'm going to be adding some modeling chocolate to the inside of the nose. I did create too much depth there, and the cake is exposed. This is the first time I've ever done a skull for someone. So I try to give myself a little bit of grace when it comes to a cake I've never designed or created before. I've skipped forward a little bit and added the back panel to the skull. And of course I see a lot of issues with the bottom of the skull, but I can fix all of that. I'm trying to erase the seam where the two panels came together, but I also purposely put the seams there because that's how our skulls look. And I won't go into the reasons behind the plates of our skull and how they're created, but I figured if I couldn't blend them seamlessly that it would look like a suture in the skull formation. So I'm just trying to smooth things out. A lot easier to do with modeling chocolate than fondant. Or fondant, however you want to pronounce it. And I also am going to skip the painting part of the cake because I don't think people want to sit here and watch 20 minutes worth of cake decorating. If for some reason you're one of those people and you're like, what? I didn't get to see how she painted it, what stuff she used, then you can send me a message and I will explain parts of it for you. When it comes to coloring modeling chocolate, that can be a little bit tricky. Some food colors will beat up on the modeling chocolate where it soaks into fondant. And there's lots of methods for that as well. You can also spray them. I also took aluminum foil, crunched it up into a little ball, and pushed it up against the surface of the modeling chocolate, and that gave me a nice rough texture. Modeling chocolate and fondant both sweat, and what I mean by sweat is once you refrigerate your cake and you pull it out to work on texture or whatever you're doing to it, when it starts coming to room temperature, it's going to create some condensation on the surface. Easy enough to fix, harder with fondant because fondant will get soggy. But the modeling chocolate, you just take a paper towel and you press it up against your modeling chocolate. But with fondant, sometimes it starts disintegrating. You still can do the same thing where you can kind of absorb the condensation with a paper towel. And I always warn my customers that can happen because they're the ones that are going to pull it out of the fridge before the party, and they might start wondering what to do if you don't tell them that that's going to happen. I want to give a big shout out to all my friends, family, and colleagues who have shown me such great support and watched these videos that I've created over the last couple weeks. Here is my final product, this beautiful skull. Happy Halloween, and come back every Thursday for a new cake. Thanks.